Jake Reynolds loved the quiet of early Saturday mornings in his suburban neighborhood. The soft chirping of birds, the scent of freshly cut grass, and the warm sunlight filtering through maple leaves all made his small patch of the world feel like a sanctuary. Today, he was in his element, pruning the overgrown bushes that lined his front yard. The rhythmic snip of his shears was almost meditative. Jake was more than just a homeowner here. He was a local police officer, a trusted figure in the community, known for his calm, fair approach. He took pride in his home, and gardening was his way to unwind from the pressures of his job. With the summer heat rising, he worked diligently, unaware that his peaceful morning was about to unravel. From across the street, a sudden sharp voice cut through the calm. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Jake glanced up, eyebrows furrowed. There stood Karen Mitchell, his neighbor, the self-appointed watchdog of the HOA. She was already on the move, striding toward him with an urgency that instantly put him on alert. Karen was famous in the neighborhood for her fierce dedication to rules. To some, she was a helpful guardian of community standards. To others, a relentless enforcer who loved conflict a little too much. Her clipboard was legendary, filled with notes about lawn heights, paint colors, and anything else she could scrutinize. And today, her glare was sharper than ever. Jake set his shears down, wiping sweat from his brow as Karen closed the distance. "Your bushes," she said, pointing a finger at the tangled branches. "They're way over the HOA's allowed height. You're breaking the rules, Jake." Jake raised a hand in a calming gesture. "Karen, I'm trimming them right now. I'm aware of the guidelines." Karen shook her head, her lips tight. "That's not good enough. You're always bending the rules. This neighborhood has standards to uphold, and you're making it look bad." Jake sighed inwardly. "Karen, I respect the HOA rules, but I'm also allowed to maintain my property as I see fit. The bushes were overgrown. I'm fixing it." Karen's eyes flashed with something sharper than anger. Determination. "Fixing it doesn't cut it. I'm going to report this. Maybe it's time the board takes stronger action." Jake felt a sudden weight in his chest. He knew Karen's threats weren't empty, and he suspected this was just the beginning of a long, unpleasant battle. But before he could respond, Karen spun on her heel and marched off, muttering under her breath. As she disappeared behind her front gate, Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A message from his partner at the station. "Heads up. Someone called 911, reporting suspicious activity in your neighborhood. Not sure who yet." Jake's stomach tightened. Suspicious activity in his own backyard. His mind raced with possibilities. Was Karen behind this? Had she already escalated her complaints beyond the HOA board? He glanced back toward Karen's house. Her windows were shut tight, and the front door was locked. But the cold glare she'd given him lingered like a warning. Something was definitely brewing, and Jake knew his quiet Saturday had just turned into something far more complicated. He picked up his shears again, but paused, hands trembling slightly. This wasn't just about a hedge anymore. It was about trust, respect, and how far a neighbor would go to enforce rules, or to win a personal fight. As Jake stared down the street, watching neighbors go about their routines, he realized the calm facade of his community was cracking, and in the middle of it all was Karen, ready to push things to the edge. Jake barely had time to process the 911 dispatch message before his phone buzzed again. This time it was the police radio crackling with his name. "Officer Reynolds, be advised, we have a suspicious person. Call in your neighborhood. Location, Oakwood Lane. Respond code 2. He frowned, setting his gardening tools aside. Suspicious person. In his own neighborhood. The knot in his stomach tightened. He glanced toward Karen's house once more. Was this connected? Could she really have called 911 on him? The thought seemed absurd. But knowing Karen, nothing was impossible. Jake grabbed his keys, slipped into his uniform, and headed out. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the quiet street as he drove. His cruiser's blue and red lights remained off. He wasn't rushing to an emergency. Still, his mind raced with questions. What exactly had Karen reported? And why? Pulling up to Oakwood Lane, Jake scanned the area. The street was almost deserted, save for a few cars parked in driveways, and a couple of neighbors peering cautiously. From behind curtains, he spotted Karen standing near her front porch, arms crossed tightly, her expression unreadable in the dimming light. "Karen," Jake called out as he stepped from his cruiser. "I got the call. What's going on?" Karen's eyes narrowed, flicking briefly to his uniform, before she squared her shoulders. "I called because I saw someone lurking near my house earlier today. I was worried. Didn't know if they meant harm." Jake nodded slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Did you recognize the person?" Karen hesitated, then shook her head. "No, they were just there, watching. I thought it was strange." "You're a cop. You tell me. Shouldn't someone be doing something?" Jake looked around carefully, scanning the quiet street, noting the absence of any suspicious figures. "Did you get a good look? Could it have been a neighbor? Maybe someone out for a walk?" Karen's mouth twitched with frustration. "I don't know. It's just not normal for people to wander around here without a reason. I wasn't going to take chances." Jake sighed inwardly. He wanted to believe Karen's concern was genuine, but he also knew her reputation for blowing things out of proportion. Still, he had a duty to investigate. "All right," Jake said, pulling out his notepad. "I'll do a quick walk around. You stay here for now." As he moved down the street, Jake's eyes scanned every shadow, every lawn, every darkened window. The neighborhood was peaceful. Too peaceful. No signs of forced entry, no unusual footprints, no discarded items, just the familiar homes he'd known for years. Yet beneath the surface calm, Jake felt a growing unease. Was this really just a false alarm? Or was something else at play? Returning to Karen's porch, Jake found her watching him intently. "You're sure there's nothing here?" Jake met her gaze steadily. "Nothing suspicious that I can see, but I'll keep an eye out." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Good, because I'm tired of feeling unsafe." As Jake got back into his cruiser, a knot tightened in his gut. Something about the whole situation felt off, like a puzzle with pieces missing. He couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's 911 call was less about safety and more about sending a message. Driving away, Jake glanced in his rearview mirror. From the shadows near Karen's house, a figure slipped behind a fence, watching him leave. Jake didn't see the face, but he knew one thing for certain. This was no ordinary HOA dispute, and the real trouble was just beginning. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Jake Reynolds felt the weight of unseen eyes as he stepped outside, still wearing the uniform that marked him both as protector and, now, a target of gossip. The morning sun glinted off the freshly trimmed bushes, the very bushes Karen had called out the day before. Jake hoped today would bring some calm. He was wrong. No sooner had he taken a few steps from his front door than Karen's sharp voice sliced through the quiet. Again, "Officer Reynolds." "Wait!" Jake turned, his jaw tightening. Karen was standing near the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, an expression of barely concealed fury. Behind her, a small crowd of neighbors gathered, some peeking from their porches, others lingering by the street, drawn by the simmering tension. Karen didn't waste time with pleasantries. You think you can just ignore the rules because you wear a badge. You're no different than the rest of us. When it comes to the HOA, Jake took a deep breath, his voice steady but firm. Karen, I'm respecting the HOA rules. I'm also a police officer, and I'm here to keep the peace. I don't want this to escalate, but you're making it escalate. Karen shot back. You ignored my warnings, and then you showed up at my door in uniform after I called 911 on you. Do you understand how that looks? Like you're trying to intimidate me. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not what happened. I responded, professionally to your call. My job is to protect all the residents, including you. Karen scoffed and turned to the crowd, raising her voice, just enough to be heard by the growing group. Some of us care about the community, some of us don't. The murmurs swelled. Some neighbors nodded in agreement with Karen, while others exchanged uneasy glances. The fragile peace of the neighborhood was cracking. Suddenly, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly widow who lived 2 houses down, stepped forward. Karen, maybe we should calm down. Jake's a good man, and this fight isn't helping anyone. Karen shot Mrs. Henderson a cold look. With all due respect, ma'am, this is about standards. If we let people break the rules, where does it end? Jake saw the tension tighten like a noose around the neighborhood's throat, but he also noticed something else. A flicker of uncertainty in Karen's eyes. It wasn't just about rules. There was something personal behind her fury. He cleared his throat. Karen, maybe we need to take this to the HOA board. Let them decide. Karen shook her head fiercely. No, this has gone too far already. You need to understand there are consequences. Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down. It was a message from his partner at the station. Heads up, multiple calls tonight about disturbances near Karen's property. His heart skipped a beat. Disturbances? That couldn't be coincidence. He looked back at Karen. Karen, I need to know. Are you all right? Is something else going on here? Karen's facade cracked for a fraction of a second. She looked away, then back, eyes narrowing. You wouldn't understand. Before Jake could press further, the crowd began to disperse, whispers trailing. Behind them, like smoke, the fragile truce shattered. As Jake watched Karen retreat behind her gate, he felt the chilling certainty that this was no ordinary HOA quarrel. Something deeper and darker was simmering just beneath the surface. The question gnawed at him. Was Karen the problem? Or a pawn in something much bigger? The next HOA meeting was anything but routine. The community center hall was packed far beyond usual numbers. An uneasy energy humming in the air. Oh, neighbors whispered among themselves. Eyes darting toward Jake Reynolds as he entered, the uniform under his jacket, making him both familiar and oddly out of place. Across the room, Karen Mitchell sat rigidly at the front table, her clipboard clasped tight like a shield. Jake took a deep breath and scanned the crowd. What started as a simple complaint about bushes had morphed into something far bigger, an all-out neighborhood standoff that threatened to fracture years of neighborly trust. Karen rose first, her voice sharp and rehearsed. I'm here today because our community standards are under attack. Officer Reynolds has blatantly disregarded our HOA rules. And when I called 911 over suspicious behavior, he responded, not with understanding, but with intimidation. We need to ask ourselves, if our own law enforcement won't respect the rules, who will? Murmurs erupted across the room. Some nodded in approval. Faces hardened with frustration. Others exchanged wary glances, unsettled by Karen's version of events. Jake stood, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Let me be clear. I respect the HOA and its rules. I responded to a 911 call made by a concerned neighbor. I have always acted in the best interests of this community. As an officer and a neighbor, Karen cut in sharply. Best interests? What about the disruption you caused? What about the neighbors who are now afraid because of your actions? The tension snapped like a taut wire. Voices rose, neighbors shouted back and forth, some defending Jake, others supporting Karen's strict enforcement. The room fractured into factions overnight. Amid the chaos, Mrs. Langley, a longtime resident, stood up with a trembling voice. This fighting, it's tearing us apart. We need to find common ground, not enemies. Jake nodded. I agree. But to do that, we need to understand what's really going on. This isn't just about bushes or calls. It's about trust. The meeting dissolved into smaller groups. Jake caught a whispered conversation between two neighbors near the door. Did you hear? One said. I heard Karen had a nasty fallout with someone years ago. Maybe that's why she's so intense. Yeah, the other replied. I don't think this is just about the rules. There's more beneath the surface. Jake's curiosity piqued. What secrets was Karen hiding? Could her past be the key to this escalating feud? Later that evening, back at the station, Jake pulled up public records and asked around discreetly. A pattern emerged. Karen's previous disputes had ended badly, one even involving police intervention over threats and harassment. No one had mentioned it at the HOA meeting, but the pieces fit together. Still, Jake knew he couldn't jump to conclusions. He needed to understand Karen's story before passing judgment. Back in the neighborhood, the whispers spread like wildfire. Rumors fueled suspicion, dividing friends and families. The once peaceful community now felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. Jake stood on his porch, staring into the night. The darkness seemed heavier, thick with secrets and unspoken grievances. And somewhere within that darkness, Karen waited, her motivations as mysterious as ever. The question haunted him. Was Karen's crusade truly about protecting the neighborhood? Or was it about something far more personal? Before sleep could claim him, Jake made a decision. Tomorrow he would confront Karen, not as a cop responding to calls, but as a neighbor seeking answers. The next morning, Jake felt a restless energy. As he arrived at the police station, the neighborhood was already fracturing beneath the surface, and he needed to understand the root of the conflict before it spiraled further out of control. His partner, Officer Sarah Collins, caught his eye across the bullpen. Hey, Sarah said quietly, sliding into the seat beside him. I heard what's going on with Karen and your neighborhood. Jake nodded. Yeah, it's worse than I thought. She called 911 on me. The whole community is on edge. Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice. You should know something. Karen's past isn't exactly clean. She had a nasty dispute with a neighbor a few years back. Escalated to threats, police involvement. It didn't end well. Jake's brows furrowed. Why didn't I hear about this before? Because Karen's good at keeping it under wraps when it suits her, Sarah said. But that history explains a lot. Her obsession with control, her zero-tolerance attitude. Some folks in the department still remember how volatile she was. Jake's mind raced. This wasn't just about bushes or HOA rules anymore. There was personal history fueling Karen's fire, and it was spilling into the entire neighborhood. Back home, Jake sat at his kitchen table, pulling out old news clippings Sarah had sent him. One story detailed a bitter feud between Karen and her former next-door neighbor, ending in a restraining order and several police visits. The neighbor had accused Karen of harassment. Karen claimed she was protecting her property and family. The more Jake read, the clearer it became. Karen's crusade was rooted in fear and past pain, but also in a desire for control, a way to prevent history from repeating itself. Yet something didn't sit right. While Karen's past was messy, these incidents were years old. Why was she escalating things now? That evening, Jake took a slow drive through the neighborhood. He noticed small signs of trouble: a vandalized mailbox, a broken garden light, mysterious footprints near freshly disturbed soil. Someone was stirring unrest, but who? Jake's gut told him Karen might not be the only one behind the growing chaos. Later, as darkness settled, Jake stopped outside Karen's house, the porch light casting long shadows. He noticed the gate was slightly ajar, a rare sight given Karen's usual vigilance. He hesitated, then quietly stepped inside, calling out, "Karen? It's Jake." No answer. His eyes caught a flicker of movement near the side of the house. Carefully he approached, heart pounding. There, half hidden behind the garden shed, was a figure darting away into the night. Jake gave chase, but lost the shadow among the thick trees and fences. Returning to the porch, he found a note pinned to the door in neat, urgent handwriting. "Stop digging. Some secrets should stay buried. You don't know what you're getting into." Jake's hands trembled slightly as he folded the note. Whoever was behind this wanted silence, and they weren't afraid to threaten him. He looked up at the dark windows of Karen's house, wondering if she knew more than she let on, or if she too was being manipulated. One thing was certain: the neighborhood's troubles ran deeper than any HOA dispute, and Jake was caught right in the middle of a mystery that threatened to unravel everything. The morning light struggled to break through the thick clouds as Jake Reynolds drove towards the police station, the threatening note still heavy in his pocket. His mind churned with questions, but one thing was clear: someone wanted him to back off, and that someone was playing dirty. Jake knew he couldn't ignore the warning. This was no longer a simple HOA dispute or a personal vendetta. It was turning into a full-blown mystery, with danger lurking in the shadows. Back at the station, Jake pored over neighborhood reports. The recent vandalism wasn't isolated. There were multiple incidents across Oakwood Lane. A smashed car window here, a graffiti tag on a mailbox there, threatening messages scrawled in anonymous handwriting. Each act seemed calculated to unsettle the residents. Jake called Sarah Collins over. "We're dealing with more than just Karen's complaints. Someone's escalating this. Intimidation, threats, property damage. This is harassment on a serious level." Sarah frowned. "Do we have any suspects?" Jake shook his head. "Not yet, but whoever it is knows the neighborhood well. They're watching, waiting." As Jake left the station that afternoon, his police cruiser rolled slowly through the streets. He saw neighbors peering out nervously, wary eyes following his every move. The sense of community was unraveling, replaced by suspicion and fear. Later at home, Jake's phone buzzed with an incoming message. "Meet me at the old park bench near Elm Street at midnight." Alone, no signature. His heart raced. Was it a trap or a clue? Jake debated telling the department, but instinct told him this was personal. If he involved others, whoever was behind the threats might escalate further or vanish. That night, Jake parked his cruiser near the deserted park. The air was thick and cold, shadows twisting between the trees. He scanned the area carefully, hand resting on his sidearm as he stepped toward the old wooden bench. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. A woman, her face obscured by a hood. "Jake Reynolds," she whispered, voice low but steady. "You don't know what you're getting into." He tensed, ready to react. "I'm trying to help," she continued. "Karen isn't the enemy, but she's caught in something bigger than she realizes." Jake frowned. "Who are you? What do you mean?" Before she could answer, A sudden noise from the bushes made Jake pivot sharply. The woman took a step back, then vanished into the night. Jake was left alone, the chill biting into his skin as questions spun wildly in his mind. Was this stranger friend or foe? And what bigger trouble was Karen tangled in? As he returned to his cruiser, a flicker of movement caught his eye near the edge of the park, a shadow slipping away like smoke. Jake's gut tightened. The game had changed. The quiet suburb he once called home was now a battleground of secrets, threats, and hidden dangers, and Jake was right in the center. Jake couldn't shake the image of the hooded woman from his mind. Who was she? What did she know? And why had she vanished so quickly, leaving more questions than answers? Days passed, but the neighborhood's tension thickened like a storm about to break. Vandalism continued. Whispers grew louder, and Karen's public crusade showed no signs of relenting. Yet Jake sensed something else. Beneath Karen's rigid exterior was a woman battling fears she refused to share. One afternoon, Jake was walking his dog near the edge of the neighborhood when the hooded woman appeared again. This time, there was no hesitation. "You need to listen," she said, pulling back her hood to reveal sharp eyes and a face weathered by years of hardship. Jake studied her cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Claire," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I've been watching. This feud, it's more than HOA rules or personal grudges." Jake frowned. "Then what is it?" Claire glanced around nervously before continuing. "Years ago, there was a hidden dispute over land rights here. Karen's family was involved. It never made the news, but the bitterness remains, and some neighbors are still bitter. Someone is using those old wounds to stir up trouble." Jake's mind raced. A long-buried feud, hidden agendas, and now a series of threats and vandalism. The pieces were starting to fit, but not neatly. "Why come to me?" Jake asked. Claire looked him in the eyes. "Because you're not just a cop. You're one of them. You have a chance to stop this before it destroys everyone." Before Jake could reply, Claire's eyes widened. "You have to be careful. They're watching us." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed nearby. Jake spun around, heart pounding, but saw only a tipped-over trash can, swaying in the wind. "Stay safe, Jake," Claire whispered, before disappearing down a side street. Jake stood alone, the weight of the warning heavy on his shoulders. That evening, back home, Jake tried to piece together the tangled web. He called Karen, hoping for answers, but she refused to meet. The next day, Karen's mailbox was found smashed. A chilling message spray-painted across her front gate. "Truth will burn." Jake's blood ran cold. He realized the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. This was no ordinary neighborhood spat. It was a war hidden beneath polite smiles and manicured lawns. Determined, Jake prepared for a confrontation, knowing that the coming days would decide the fate of Oakwood Lane. The night air was thick with tension as Jake Reynolds approached Karen Mitchell's house. The vandalized gate still bore the chilling message, "Truth will burn." But tonight, Jake was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. Once and for all, he rang the doorbell. Moments later, Karen opened the door, her face a mixture of exhaustion and defiance. "We need to talk," Jake said calmly. Karen hesitated, then stepped aside, letting him in. Inside, the house was surprisingly modest. The walls lined with faded family photos, snapshots of a woman younger and happier, before the storms of conflict had hardened her. Karen sighed. "You want the truth? Fine. Years ago, my family was involved in a land dispute with some neighbors. Friends turned enemies. It destroyed relationships, tore apart the community, I fought hard to protect what was ours, but it cost me everything. Jake nodded slowly, seeing the weight of years in her eyes. But, Karen continued, there's something you don't know. Someone has been using that old feud to manipulate us all. Someone who wants to keep us divided and scared. Jake's heart raced. Who? Karen looked away, voice dropping to a whisper. It's Claire. Jake stared. Claire, the mysterious woman who had warned him, who claimed to be helping. Karen's confession hit like a shockwave. Claire was part of that old family feud. She's been stirring up trouble to gain control of the neighborhood. To settle old scores in her favor, Jake's mind reeled. The woman who warned him was the real puppeteer behind the chaos. Why didn't you say anything before? Jake asked. Karen's eyes glistened with regret. I thought I was protecting everyone. But Claire's threats and vandalism pushed me too far. I lashed out. I called 911 because I was scared, not because I wanted a fight. Jake realized this was no longer about rules or grudges. It was a battle for the soul of the community. Determined to end the nightmare, Jake confronted Claire with evidence and a promise. The neighborhood deserved peace, and no one would be allowed to terrorize it. The confrontation was tense, but decisive. Claire, faced with exposure, retreated, her influence broken. Slowly the community began to heal. Neighbors talked again, mended fences, and found common ground. Karen and Jake, once adversaries, became unlikely allies, working to rebuild trust and ensure the HOA rules protected, rather than divided. As the sun rose over Oakwood Lane, Jake stood with Karen and neighbors, watching children play on the freshly mowed lawns. A symbol of hope. The mystery had ended, but the lesson lingered. Sometimes the greatest threats aren't what we see, but the secrets we hide, and the courage it takes to confront them.